the dimensions. I proposed that the Grand Gallery was a resonator hall. And the reason why, there was several events that transpired before I actually theorized that. One was a very excellent CD or LP when I got it. CDs haven't been invented, but it was by Paul Horn. It was called Inside the Great Pyramid. Anybody hear that LP? Oh, look at all them hands go up. Great, great. Well, anyway, that's a fabulous CD. It really transports you. You really think you're there. And that's why I was banging on the coffin, Mark, while you were laying in there. I hope I didn't disturb your sleep. But anyway, or your trip, whatever you're doing. But anyway, Paul Horn, when he started the CD, is banging on the coffer inside the King's Chamber, and he's got that 440. Oh, by the way, should I tell them about 440? All right, let me tell you about 440. This is a really neat story. You'll like this. Then we'll get on with some real stuff. But anyway, when we got to Egypt, everybody was tired, and I got my bag, and I went to the room and checked in, opened the window, opened the curtains, and there, right in front of me, is the Great Pyramid, full frontal north face. Wow, that's great, that's fantastic. Sitting on the patio, looking over at the Great Pyramid. And then I look down, and there's my room key, and it's 440. Ooh, this is really cool. I like this. And then we checked out of the hotel, and we came back a week later, and I get my room number, and I go to Andrea, and I said, Andrea, did you do something? Did you persuade them to give me 440 again? No. I was the only person who was actually assigned the same room number when I got back off the cruise. I was in 440 again. Anyway, that's beside the point. But it was a kind of a neat story. I was impressed. Body, mind, spirit journeys. You got to go on. I'm telling you. But so this chamber resonates at 440. Well, Paul Horn, when he made his LP here, he wrote a little booklet. And in the little booklet, there was a clue to what's going on in the Grand Gallery. And what he said was that he made his recording. Then he went out onto the Great Step, and he played his flute on the Great Step. And he said, oh, he was a little disappointed in the reverberation. It sounded rather flat. But there was a sound coming from somewhere else. And the sound from the flute was going out into the Grand Gallery, bouncing around, and then it was echoing, or coming back to him, from the King's Chamber. The sound was actually, he could hear more coming from the King's Chamber than he could from the Grand Gallery. And that is the key to the Grand Gallery, is that when we are channeling those earth energies through the pyramids, we need a little more energy to drive these granite beams to resonance than what we can achieve just in this small area. So in the Grand Gallery, we house a bank of resonators. And those resonators take those earth energies and convert those vibrations to airborne sound. And then that sound is focused through this opening and reverberates or drives this complex into a vibrating massive energy. This complex right here is totally freestanding within the Great Pyramid. The walls are freestanding from the core masonry. There's a gap on the outside of these walls. They're freestanding. The floor is freestanding. I'll tell you a little story about the floor. But the floor is freestanding. It's inserted inside the walls so that the walls are not pressing down. Those ancient engineers and scientists, they didn't want any damp spots. They didn't want any dampening. So the walls actually go down on the outside of the floor about 5 inches. But the interesting thing on the floor was when I was there in 1995, and I was doing some acoustic tests. The guards thought I was meditating, but I wasn't in that frame of mind at that time. I wanted to check and see if there was any RF frequencies coming from the granite. So I paid about $100 to stay in the King's Chamber. After all the tourists had gone, I wanted at least a half an hour. And I had a tape recorder with me, I had a tuner with me, a chromatic tuner, and I also had an RF counter. But I wanted the lights off because I wanted to make sure that there was no noise, electrical noise, that would interfere with any true readings that I might have. So I was in there and I had the tape recorder going and I was intoning the sound of the chamber, the distinct 440 frequency. Oh, it's great, I was really getting into it. But anyway, the lights weren't going off. And so finally I just stomped across the floor, climbed through the passageway, yelled down to the guards, "Turn off the lights," and then came back into the chamber, and fortunately I got back just in time because they turned the lights off, and there was my flashlight, and then I was able to conduct my tests. One problem I had, though, was that while the lights went off, the fans didn't. They were on a separate circuit, and the fans kept on running, so I was thwarted in that respect. Hopefully this year we can get some purer readings. But back in my room later, I had the tape recorder running, and I also had the chromatic tuner, and the tape recorder had recorded all my chanting. It had recorded every step that I took across the floor. It recorded my yelling down the grand gallery to turn off the lights. And by the way, the separation, my tape recorder was over here and I was out here. And when I yelled down to turn off the lights, it was almost like I was right next to the tape recorder. It wasn't like there was a separation of thousands of tons of granite and limestone between me and the tape recorder. And there's a reason for that. But the other part of it was that every step I took across the floor, as it was played back, the tuner recorded 440. So it's not just the intoning of the frequency, but even striking the floor with a footstep caused the chamber to ring 440, which is brilliant. It's great. The other part that was really neat was that when you're in the chamber and you are intoning that 440, very strong tone, you don't hear what else is going on. There's other things going on. And the tape recorder actually picked that up. And it was higher frequencies where the power, or the energy, was cascading to higher frequencies within the chamber as I was intoning. And that was played back on the tape recorder. So really we're talking about these master engineers, scientists, acoustic engineers. And nothing they did by chance. Everything was intentional. And so then I began to think about these granite beams above. And I came to the conclusion that those granite beams, they had to have actually tuned them to respond to a particular frequency. And really, just like piano strings, if you strike one and you undampen the strings, another one at a higher octave will resonate. The harmonic of that particular frequency will resonate. It will absorb the energy and respond in sympathy with it. And you can actually transfer energy from this lowest beam clear to the top beam if each of those beams is tuned to the same frequency or a harmonic of that frequency. And that is what I believe is happening. The other part was that when Howard Weiss's men went into this opening right here, they found that the whole floor of the top of the beams was covered with this fine black powder. And the fine black powder, they examined it and they determined